Ladies and gentlemen, Railroads and Regulation, 1877 to 1916, by Gabriel Kolko, K-O-L-K-O, published 1965, Princeton University Press. I'm going to start in the introduction. I don't know how much I'll do. I haven't read past the introduction, but the introduction's got some stuff that's worth having, and someday I'll probably do some excerpts from the rest of this text. So on page 2, second page of the introduction, quote, historians, as a result of their comprehensive assumption about the general nature of federal regulation and progressivism, naturally assumed the railroads opposed federal regulation. Historians assume that the railroads didn't want regulation, and the regulation was imposed on them by a government that was trying to do good for the people, and by doing good for the people, of course, the businessmen's interests will be harmed, right? Because either the businessmen profit or the people profit, and you always have to stop the businessmen from viciously taking advantage of the people. That's what these laws and regulations are all about. Actually, there's nothing that the railroads liked more than to get either a check from the government for this or that, or to have the government regulate their enemy, their competitor. There was constantly, throughout the 1800s, people going to the legislature to get this or that charter for a monopoly on, for example, boat traffic up and down the Hudson River. There was an injunction against a railroad company that was going to build a bridge across the river. The fight in court was between the railroad company and a ferry company that ferries people across, you know. And they wanted to say that this is obstruction of the river, and we already have this business, you know, the railroad shouldn't be able to come in and charge people to bring them across the river back and forth, because we're already here doing that, and they'll drive us out of business, and we were here first. Again and again and again you find this. The railroads wanted regulation for the purpose of making money, extra money themselves from government contracts or subsidies, or to pin down their opponents, their competition. Now we skip down a little ways. He says that when other industries begin to grow after the year 1900 or so, other industries are growing in size and power, and all these assumptions have been made about the railroads, that regulation was made despite the evil, selfish businessmen not wanting rules to be enforced. Still, the good, forthright people of the federal government have gone and enforced rules on the bastards. And carrying this attitude into the other industries, everyone expects that the other industries also don't want regulation. So the main primary concern is to get some sort of regulations and rules on these bastards running these other businesses now. And let's quote from that point. This, I believe, has led to serious neglect of the origin and purpose of federal regulation as a whole, and has inspired the notion that advocates of federal regulation were progressive in the generic as well as political sense. Progressive in their fundamental desire to redress the balance of economic, social, and political power in favor of the average citizen. Now, if that wasn't the purpose of regulation, what was the purpose of regulation? Very often to benefit the people that were being regulated. Now, you and I, as students of objectivism, and perhaps other people watching, will know that it is like thinking that you're going to be benefited from cutting off one of your fingers or something. It's just insane, and yet there are religions that advocate self-mutilation and stuff, flagellation and cutting yourself, and it's just insane. And we know that. We know that about business, that inviting the government into your business to regulate you or your partner or your enemy, your competition, inviting them in to regulate is the death knell of your freedom. It does not mean you're going to benefit. It means you're going to lose freedoms. And possibly some of these companies were able to continue to exist under government regulation where they wouldn't have been able to continue to exist without it. That's very likely, and you could say, well, then it was in their self-interest to be able to get the government regulation in. This is the very center point about regulation, that it doesn't matter who benefits and who is harmed by it. The point is that regulation as such has to be made illegal so that people don't go out and try to use the government to benefit themselves. We also know that the regulations are inefficient and lead to more government spending and atrocious waste, and very, very often accomplish the exact opposite of what they are intended to accomplish, and sometimes, in the leftover cases, don't accomplish what they were trying to accomplish anyway. We all know that. But that's the central argument here, is why should regulation be allowed, or why should it be stopped? It should be allowed to protect the average citizen? No, the average citizen doesn't get protected by it. The average citizen, for example, with the Interstate Commerce Commission, the average citizen ended up paying higher rates instead of lower ones. The Commerce Commission was set up to lower railroad rates and make sure they're being fair. And of course, as soon as it gets set up, the railroads move in, take over the board, the commission, and use it to keep rates high and make it illegal for your competing railroads to lower their prices. And they say you can't lower your prices below this, the government says so. Now sure, it was set up to keep prices low, but they have the power, and who's going to stop them from using the power now? What are you going to do, set up another board? Who's got the money to take over that board? The railroads. So every time you set up a situation to oversee our freedoms and revoke them at will, someone's going to take that situation over who stands to benefit from it. Someone who stands to benefit is going to take the situation over, and if you're regulating railroads, then the railroads are going to take that situation over. If you're regulating religion, religion is going to take that situation over, like they have with the Muslim Council or whatever of France. France sets up this council to make sure that the government isn't offending Muslims with all of its policies, and they always go to this council to say, what should we do now, what should we do about housing, how many mosques should we build, where should we hire our people from the mosques, because you know the government over there pays for the churches and the people who preach in them, and they go to this council and ask where they should get the people to preach in the mosques. What kind of imbeciles do you think have taken over this council, except for nightmarish Muslim radicals? That's what's happened. So you, just as soon as you think you can revoke someone's freedom and do any good, you've revoked their freedom, you move on, and the bad guys take over the little horrific situation that's been set up again and again. So continuing a quote, the author says, I will suggest in the following pages that the intervention of the federal government not only failed to damage the interests of the railroads, but was positively welcomed by them, since the railroads never really had the power over the economy and their own industry, often ascribed to them. So he says the railroads never even had this power. So when you come in, the government comes in and says, we're going to regulate you in this and that way to prevent the use of these powers, the railroads aren't losing anything necessarily by these supposed powers being restricted, powers they never had. They never had the power to manipulate the stock market up and down and raise rates or lower rates with complete disregard for competition. They never had that power. You know, if you rate any given service or good is not just in competition with its immediate competitors. It's in competition with every single other service and good produced by society and in society. For example, you're talking about freight rates on the railroads. Raise the freight rates too high, people might start using oxes and carts to get their goods around. And you know, if it's economical, if it's more economical than the railroads, then they will. Or they'll start using more boat traffic or ferry traffic or whatever like that. Or maybe another damn railroad will be built. If your rates are too high, pretty soon there will be competing railroad route, unless the government has the power to stop this from happening. So let's continue. Indeed, so the railroads didn't have this power, so they welcomed the government intervention. Indeed, the railroads, not the farmers and shippers, were the most important single advocates of federal regulation from 1877 to 1916. No one fought harder to bring regulation in than the railroads. They wanted it. They fought for it. This just goes to show that we are not going to be able to count on people's selfishness.